My name is Serena. The kind of place my parents chose for their 35th anniversary dinner. The Hargrove Room at the top of the Meridian Hotel is not my kind of place. I don't mean that in a self-deprecating way. I've eaten at places like that before. I know how to hold the right fork and which water glass is mine and when to laugh at something that isn't funny. I just don't enjoy it. The lighting is too soft. The portions are too small. Everyone's performing something. But my mother had called me 3 times that week asking if I was coming. So I went. I wore the black dress I keep in the back of my closet for funerals and occasions that feel like funerals. I drove myself. I didn't tell anyone what time I'd be arriving. My sister was already there when I walked in. Of course she was. Her name is Brooke. She's 28, 2 years younger than me, and she has the kind of smile that makes wait staff pull out chairs without being asked. She was wearing something pale pink and expensive, and she was laughing at something my father had said before I even made it to the table. Serena. My mother stood to hug me. The hug lasted exactly 2 seconds. We weren't sure you'd make it. I said I was coming. You always say that. I sat down. I ordered water. I looked at my father, who nodded at me the way you nod at a neighbor you don't particularly like but see too often to ignore. How's the job? He asked. Good, I said. Still at that tech company? Still at that tech company. He nodded again and turned back to Brooke. That was the extent of it. That was, as it always had been, the extent of it. I want to be fair here. My parents are not monsters. They didn't lock me in a basement or forget to feed me. They sent me to good schools. They bought me a winter coat every year until I was old enough to buy my own. When I got the flu at 14, my mother made soup from scratch and left it outside my door. But there is a particular kind of invisibility that has nothing to do with cruelty. It's quieter than that. It lives in the small choices. Who gets the window seat on road trips? Whose school play gets put on the refrigerator? Who the camera turns to first at Christmas morning? It lives in the way a room changes when certain people walk into it and doesn't change at all when others do. Brooke walked into rooms, and the air shifted. I walked into rooms and moved around furniture. I don't know when I first understood this. Probably around the time I was 11, and I won the regional math competition, and came home to find my parents throwing Brooke a surprise birthday party they'd apparently been planning for weeks. I stood in the doorway holding my ribbon, and my mother said, "Oh, honey, you can show us later. Come have cake." I showed them later. They said, "Great job." The ribbon ended up in a shoebox in my closet. The dinner conversation that night moved the way it always does when our family gathers. Around Brooke, like a river around a rock. Her promotion at the marketing firm. The trip to Tuscany she and her boyfriend were planning. The apartment she was looking at in Lincoln Park, 2 bedrooms, beautiful light. My father said, "Whatever you need, sweetheart, it's your time." My mother said she works so hard. I ate my salmon and looked at the window and thought about the quarterly report I had to finish by Monday. Then my father cleared his throat. He does this when he's about to say something he's rehearsed. I've known this about him since I was 8. "Your mother and I have been talking," he said, "and we've decided to give Brooke the investment account." I set down my fork. The investment account. Not a savings bond. Not a gift card. The account my grandmother had opened in my name the year I was born. The one that had been sitting, growing, compounding for 30 years. The one that, the last time I'd checked, was worth around $340,000. The one that my parents had been listed as co-trustees on until I turned 25. At which point, according to my grandmother's instructions, it was supposed to transfer fully to me. I turned 25 18 months ago. She's at a critical stage in her career. My father continued, looking at me the way you look at someone when you're explaining something obvious, and you're stable. You've always been stable. Brooke needs a foundation right now. My mother nodded. You understand, don't you? You've always been the practical one. Brooke was looking at her plate. I picked my fork back up. Sure, I said. Here's what they didn't know. They didn't know that 8 months after my 25th birthday, I had contacted the estate attorney who handled my grandmother's trust, A woman named Miss Garner had set it up, and she was thorough, meticulous, the kind of attorney who puts semicolons in the right places and never misses a filing deadline. The account had transferred to my sole ownership the month I turned 25. Fully, legally, without my parents' knowledge because they had never asked, and no one had told them because no one was required to. I had rolled that $340,000 into a brokerage account I'd opened 3 years prior. I'd been investing since I was 22. Quietly, seriously, without telling anyone. Because I had learned early that the things I was proud of were safer when I kept them to myself. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I didn't say anything at the dinner table that night. I asked for the dessert menu. I ordered the creme brulee. I listened to my father talk about the logistics of the transfer, which account, which timeline, how Brooke could use it as a down payment on the Lincoln Park apartment. Brooke said, "Are you sure this is okay, Serena?" I said, "It's fine." She nodded, relieved, and started talking about the apartment again. I drove home in silence. I didn't cry. I wasn't even sure I was angry. It was more like something had settled into place, some long-held suspicion finally confirmed, the kind of confirmation that doesn't hurt as much as you expected because you always knew it was true. I poured myself a glass of wine. I sat on the couch. I opened my laptop. I looked at my brokerage account. I thought, okay, let them. I should tell you something about the past few years. After college, while Brooke was doing internships at ad agencies and posting pictures from rooftops in Chicago, I was taking every online course I could find on personal finance, index funds, options basics, real estate fundamentals. Not because I had a plan exactly. More because I'd grown up in a house where money was something other people handled, and I had decided at some point I couldn't pinpoint that I would not be that person. My first job out of college paid $52,000 a year. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood my mother called up and coming, in a tone that meant she was worried for my safety. I cooked at home. I drove a 2014 Honda Civic. I maxed out my 401k and opened a Roth IRA the first year I was eligible. I wasn't miserable. That's the part that's hard to explain to people. I was actually pretty content. I liked my apartment. I liked my routines. I liked the spreadsheet I kept color-coded, updated every Sunday morning with coffee, tracking my net worth month by month. By year 2, I'd been promoted. By year 3, I was managing a team. By year 4, I'd moved to a company that gave me stock options as part of my compensation, and I had started to understand, in a way I hadn't before, how wealth actually compounds. I didn't buy the expensive apartment. I didn't take the trips. I kept driving the Civic. My parents, on the rare occasions we spoke about money, said I was too cautious. Too careful. "You're young," my mother said once. "You should enjoy it." My father said something about how Brooke had a certain boldness that I lacked. I smiled and changed the subject. 3 months after the anniversary dinner, Brooke called me. She had put in an offer on the Lincoln Park apartment. The seller had countered. She needed another $40,000 to make it work, and she was wondering, just wondering, no pressure, if I had anything extra I could lend her. "The account Dad gave you," I said. "That wasn't enough?" Silence. Then there were some other things I needed to take care of first. I didn't ask what things. I said I'd think about it and I'd let her know. I didn't lend her the money. She didn't get the apartment. For about 6 weeks, my parents called more than usual. My father left a voicemail that said he was disappointed in my attitude. My mother sent a text that said family helps family. I responded to neither. I went back to work. The second anniversary dinner. They do this every year. 35 years, 36 fell on a Saturday in October. My father had booked a private room at a restaurant called Westfield & Co., the kind of place with a leather wine list and a host who says of course to everything. I almost didn't go. I had a work trip coming up and I was behind on sleep, and I'd spent the past year building something I was not ready to talk about in that room, with those people, in that lighting. But my aunt called me, my mother's sister, who has always been the kind of person who keeps families from fully fracturing, and she said, "Please come. It would mean a lot." It was a milestone. So I went. I wore the black dress again. The table was set for 9. My parents, Brooke, her boyfriend Kevin, my aunt and uncle, two family friends I'd known since childhood. I arrived 7 minutes late, which is the latest I ever allow myself to be. The evening moved in its usual way. Wine was poured, bread was eaten. Stories were told that everyone at the table had heard before. My aunt asked me about work, and I said it was going well, and she said she always knew I'd land on my feet. Kevin, Brooke's boyfriend, asked me what exactly my company did. I explained. He nodded with the expression people have when they're listening but not processing. So you're like an analyst? He said. Director of Product Strategy, I said. Cool, he said, and turned back to Brooke. My father, at the head of the table, was in a good mood. He'd had 2 glasses of wine by the time the entrees arrived. He told a story about a golf trip. He talked about the house in Florida they were thinking about buying for winters. Then he looked at me, and something shifted in his expression. Not unkind exactly, but evaluating, the way he's looked at me my whole life when he's about to offer me perspective I didn't ask for. Serena, he said, how are you doing? Financially, I mean. The table went a little quiet. Fine, I said, because I know we made some decisions last year that were adjustments. And I just want to make sure you're okay. He said this in a tone that was almost gentle, which was somehow harder to sit with than cruelty. My mother added, we worry about you doing everything alone. You don't need to, I said. You're almost 31, my father said. You should have a plan, a real plan, not just saving here and there. Brooke, to her credit, looked uncomfortable. She was studying the tablecloth. I have a plan, I said. My father smiled the way he smiles when he thinks I'm being defensive. Of course you do, sweetheart. I just mean, there are people who can help you manage things, advisors. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. Not everyone has the instinct for it. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I picked up my phone. I don't do things dramatically. I want to be clear about that. I'm not a person who rehearses speeches or waits for the right moment to make an entrance. But I had known, somewhere in the back of my mind, that a moment like this would come. Not hoped for it. Just known. I opened my brokerage app. I turned the phone and placed it flat on the table, facing my father. He looked down. He didn't say anything for a moment. My mother leaned over to see. The number on the screen was $1.2 million. My father looked up at me. What? What is this? My portfolio, I said, as of market close Friday. That's not possible. It's very possible, I said. I've been investing consistently since I was 22. The company I joined 4 years ago gave stock options. Those vested last year. I rolled everything forward. My mother's hand was over her mouth. The account, my father said slowly. Grandma's account. Transferred to my sole ownership 18 months ago, I said. Per the trust documents, which you could have read at any time. Silence. Kevin coughed. My aunt was very still. My father said, why didn't you tell us? I thought about that ribbon in the shoebox. I thought about the party I walked into at 11 years old, holding something I was proud of and being told to have cake. You didn't ask, I said. I want to be honest about what happened after that, because it wasn't a movie. No one burst into tears or made a grand confession. My father didn't stand up and apologize in front of everyone. My mother didn't say she finally understood. What happened was, dinner continued. Wine was refilled. My aunt said something about dessert. The conversation moved on the way conversations do at family dinners, around and around, because there are always more people at the table and not everyone has had their say and the pasta is getting cold. But something had changed. I could feel it in the way my father stopped giving me advice for the rest of the evening. In the way my mother, when she hugged me goodbye at the end of the night, held on a second longer than usual. In the way Brooke caught my eye across the parking lot and said quietly, just to me, I didn't know. I know, I said. She nodded. We didn't hug, but we stood there for a moment in the way that sisters sometimes do, in the middle of a parking lot in October, not saying anything else because nothing else needed to be said. Kevin asked me later, through Brooke, who texted me 2 days after, if I did consulting on the side. I said no. My parents called the following week. Both of them together on the same call. My father said he'd been thinking. My mother said she hoped I knew they were proud of me. I said thank you. My father said he'd made some assumptions he probably shouldn't have. I said I knew. There was a long pause. The kind that holds more than either side can say out loud. We have never been a family that talks about the real things directly. I don't know if we ever will be. But I have stopped needing us to be something we aren't. Which is its own kind of freedom. The Florida house, my father said eventually. We're putting in an offer next week. Your mother wants to know if you'd come down sometime. If we get it. I said maybe. He said okay. We hung up. I'm not telling this story because I want credit. I'm not telling it to make my parents look bad or to make myself look smart. Plenty of people are financially careful and don't end up with anything to show for it. I got lucky in some ways. The right company, the right timing, stock options that actually vested before the market corrected. I made good decisions, but good decisions don't always pay off. And I know that. I'm telling it because for a long time I believed, on some level I never fully examined, that being unseen was a permanent condition. That the way my family saw me, steady, fine, needing nothing, requiring no particular attention, was just the truth of who I was. It took me a long time to understand that being overlooked and being unimportant are not the same thing. The spreadsheet I keep is still color-coded. I still update it on Sunday mornings with coffee. The number is bigger now, and I check it less often than I used to because I'm less afraid than I used to be. The Honda Civic is still in my driveway. I'm thinking about replacing it, not with anything flashy, just something newer, with working AC because the summer here gets long and I've earned the right to be comfortable. I think my grandmother would have liked that. She was the one who opened the account after all. She was the one who told me the summer I was 9, sitting on the porch of her house in Wisconsin. Nobody will give you your foundation, Serena. You have to build it yourself. I was 9. I didn't know what she meant. I do now. I've thought a lot about that moment at the table. My father's face when he looked down at the number. The way my mother's hand went to her mouth. I didn't feel triumphant exactly. It wasn't what I'd expected to feel. It was quieter than that. Something closer to relief, or maybe just the strange stillness that comes when a thing you've been carrying for a long time finally gets set down. What I keep coming back to is this. Nothing that happened at that dinner was an accident. Not the number on the screen, not the years that built it, and not the silence I kept for so long while I was building it. I was invisible to my family for most of my life, and I think for a long time I accepted that as a verdict. Like the way they saw me was the truth of who I was. Steady, fine, unremarkable, requiring nothing. I didn't push back. I didn't demand to be seen. I just went home and opened a spreadsheet. That's not a heroic origin story. I want to be honest about that. I didn't make good decisions because I was strong. I made them because I was scared, and because I had learned very early that no one was going to show up and hand me a foundation. My grandmother told me that when I was 9 years old, sitting on a porch in Wisconsin. I didn't fully understand what she meant then. I do now. The thing about the choices my father made, giving Brooke the account, assuming I didn't need it, deciding I lacked instinct, is that they were built on a story he'd been telling himself for years without ever checking whether it was still true or whether it had ever been true. That's what happens when we stop looking at the people in front of us and just see the role we've assigned them. He saw me as the practical one, the low-maintenance one, and so he stopped looking. The gap between who I was in his mind and who I had actually become was 30 years wide and $1.2 million deep, and he hadn't noticed because he hadn't been paying attention. I'm not angry about it anymore. I was, for a while. But anger at someone for not seeing you assumes they were trying to look. I don't think my father was cruel. I think he was incurious. And incuriosity is its own kind of consequence. It closes off the chance to be surprised by the people you love. What I know for certain is that the years I spent being quiet and careful and unnoticed were also the years I built something real. The invisibility that used to feel like punishment turned out to be the exact condition I needed to work without interference, without advice I didn't ask for, without someone else's expectations sitting on my shoulders while I tried to think. There's something in that. Not every quiet person is waiting to be discovered. Some of us are just working. And Brooke, I think about her too. She had every advantage I didn't, every spotlight and every open door, and she's still figuring out what to do with herself. That's not a judgment. It's just what I've noticed. Being chosen doesn't build anything on its own. What builds something is the decision you make on the days when no one is choosing you. On the days when you're driving the old car and eating at home and updating the spreadsheet because you told yourself you would, those days compound. That's what I'd want anyone to take from this. Not the number, not the dinner, just the simple, unglamorous truth that the choices you make when no one is watching are the ones that determine everything else. I still update the spreadsheet on Sunday mornings. Coffee, laptop, the same routine I've had for years. The number is different now, but the habit is the same, and the habit is what matters. It always was.